Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Women's Network Australia's webinar on intentional profit. Our amazing special guest today is Clare Wood, author of the book Intentional Profit, Master Your Mindset and Money for a Wildly Wealthy Business. I'm sure that's what we all aspire for. So thank you, Clare, for joining us.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Okay, let's start at the very beginning because you're an accountant. I love the way accountants always confess their profession up front, almost like an apology. I'm an accountant. But I want to go back before your sort of professional history. Just talk a little bit about where you came from, your background, your family, because that is an important part of what we describe as your money story. Can you just tell us a little bit about you?
Yeah, for sure. So I grew up I'm one of 5 children. I'm the eldest of 5. And, when I grew up, we didn't have a lot of money in our house. And I like to describe that we had no luxury. So we certainly weren't living in poverty. And, I recognize my privilege as, a white educated woman living here in Australia. However, we certainly didn't live the life that, let's just say, my kids are living. We didn't have we didn't eat out. I remember at one stage we were living in a 2-bedroom house. So there were 4 of us kids at the time in 2 bunk beds in one tiny 3x3 room. And, money was always really tight. And the reason why this is important is because it's very relevant to how you start to think about money. And we'll dive into this a little bit more, but I think that it's always good to have the context of where someone has come from and even think about where you've come from, because that will play into how you think about money, which is what we're going to chat about today.
And so out of that, I think there was a time when your dad actually went back and studied. And I think he actually became an accountant and got involved in business. And there was a little bit more money in the household. But what happened? Did anything change?
Well, we were so used to living in a world of having no money. And, when we say that dad was making money, to have 5 children on an accountant's wage we certainly weren't living the life of luxury. But, we still lived pretty lean because my family was so used to not having money that our stories were like, we need to hang on to all of it. My parents were buying properties. We were still living, like we didn't do anything luxurious. So no holidays, no eating out, because my parents were so used to living without money and they were terrified. So when we did come into money, what happens is that they were scared and they're like, we've got to hang on to it. We can't possibly still do anything. We need to squirrel it all away. And again, this is important because it's starting to see the patterns that play out. The fears coming up. What if it all disappears? We're not used to having any money. What's the point in having money and enjoying money? We'll just put it all away because it's probably all going to disappear again soon.
I love the example you use in the book, how you used to at home use home brand toothpaste because you couldn't afford Colgate. And then when you could, you still used home brand toothpaste anyway, because that's the mindset that your family was in around watching every penny and making the most of it and doing without those so-called luxuries that you didn't really need.
If anyone's ever used home brand toothpaste, it is disgusting. To this day, I can still remember that taste. My kids have always had, Colgate toothpaste their whole life. They're living a very different life.
So obviously something about the world of finance must have attracted you from a fairly young age, because you did go on and do your studies and become an accountant, and things seem to be going pretty successfully. Just tell us about your early career.
And again, it's interesting just to observe so of my 5 siblings, 3 of us have gone and studied commerce accounting. Isn't that interesting? Because again, I mean, yes, there's probably we genetically are good at maths. That probably definitely plays into it. But what you'll see, and start to notice this, but like families of doctors, you'll notice that the mum and dad are doctors and they have 3 of the 4 kids become doctors. And the reason is because we're constantly, whether we recognize it or not, we're observing what people around us are doing. We're adopting their behavior. And so something very subliminal that probably happened for me is I'm like, we were broke, and then we were slightly less broke because dad became an accountant. So I was like, well, maybe I need to go to uni and become an accountant so that I'm slightly less broke, because that's better than being completely broke. It hadn't even occurred to me to go and start my own business because I'd never had that modeled for me. It wasn't even in my sphere of reality. So I suspect that was probably one of the reasons that I went to study accounting, because I thought, well, what if I can make slightly less than no money? And then when I became an accountant, I actually was very blessed. I was earning $100,000 a year by the time I was 25 years old. And all of a sudden I'm like, and again, playing out the same patterns, I was living in London, but I lived in this big share house with 10 people because it didn't even occur to me that I could not be, living in this disgusting big share house. And suddenly I had all this money and I was like, I can travel, I can go to the pub, I can eat in restaurants. And I was living large for the first time in my life. And it was a blast, I'm going to be honest. And again, thinking about how money stories relate into this, I was then like, I just got to spend this all because it's probably going to go away. So let's just have the time of my life now. I saved nothing. Nothing. My overhead costs were tiny. I paying barely any rent, but I was just blowing it all. I was having the time of my life. And again, probably subconsciously getting rid of it because I'm like, this is probably all going to go away anyway. So I may as well just have fun while I've got it.
Yeah, yeah. You obviously then kind of tamed those ways a bit, and thought about, your career and moving, but obviously moving back to Australia and so forth. But you talk in the book that you seem to come to this realization that everything that you'd learned in terms of accounting terms about profit and what we think about profit was actually wrong. How was it wrong?
So maybe I'll just share the next sort of step of my journey was that, after working in corporate for many years, I got made redundant while I was on mat leave. I had my first son and work gives me the call and says, guess what? You don't have a job anymore. I wasn't terribly surprised because I'd seen it play out with a lot of friends of mine. And that's when I decided to take the big scary leap and start my own business. So that was about 7.5 years ago now. And when I first started my business, I ran it like an accountant. I spent no money. I was focused on getting the maximum revenue for the minimum cost I could put into my business. And, I was really proud of the profit margin that I was making. I'd look at some of my peers and I'd think, I know that they're paying for branding and Facebook ads and they're running a podcast and look at their fancy pants website. I think they're losing all of that money. And then what happened a couple of years into my business, some of these peers that start at the same time as me, I'm like, they're talking about making multiple six figures a year and $1 million a year. And I was like, whoa, I'm making a couple of, $5,000 a month here. And what I realized was that I'd actually kneecapped my growth by not investing in my business. And that's where my traditional accounting mind started to think, maybe I've got this all wrong. Because yes, I can tick along and have like a good little business, or I can create an amazing business if I'm willing to spend some money putting into it.
That must have been a really hard decision for the no-name toothpaste girl.
Yes, it was. And you can imagine how hard it is when you're so used to not spending money to actually go and invest in your business. But this is one of the key things that, I help my clients get incredible breakthrough results. I've had clients of mine scale from 20, 30K months to over $100,000 months. And people are like, what's the secret? And I'm like, shifting how you think ultimately, and then taking action that's aligned to it. So I knew that I had to do something similar myself.
So just that sense of profit, that it's not about just looking at what's coming in and what's going out, but looking at it with, and I know you talk about with a different mindset. So how did your mindset change at that time?
Well, I actually invested to do a mindset course. I knew that I couldn't just change my mindset myself. So I invested to be in my first program. It was a couple of $1,000s. It was terrifying. I didn't even have the money for it. I had to go on the payment plan. And that's kind of where things started to turn around. Was really when I went, what is this money mindset stuff? How can I get past all of my fears, my stories, my past, and start to do things differently? So that's really when things started to change for me. Yeah, a couple of years into business.
And how did you personally commit to that? Because you were still running your business at that time.
Yeah.
What did you do in terms of how you personally committed to make that change? And how did it sit with you, given that you have that very much that accounting mindset?
Yeah, I have to admit, I found it all very weird when I was first learning about it. I'm like, oh yeah, I'll just think
A
about.
bit woo-woo? Was it a bit woo-woo?
Yeah, a bit woo. I was like, this is all a bit weird. It's all a bit like, how do I just think about something and it comes to me? And I mean, to be perfectly clear, that's not what money mindset is. But it was a very interesting journey for me. I definitely had to learn a lot about myself. I had to let go of a lot of things that I held onto from my past. You know, it's weird. Our subconscious mind loves to keep us where we are. And to reprogram a lot of those beliefs was really challenging. But obviously, I'm really, really glad that I've done the work because, it's had a massive impact on my business. My business has grown. So many amazing things happening in my life. And conversely, it's meant that I'm being able to support my clients to achieve really breakthrough results in their business too.
So is it more than just putting a picture of $1 million yacht on the wall and saying, that's going to come to me?
Oh yeah, it's a very, very multi-layered process. Uh, you know, People say to me, "How long did it take for you to get a great mindset?" And I'm like, "I'm still doing mindset work." Like you break through one level and then that becomes normalized, like an income level or acquiring a new asset. And then there's this period where you don't kind of feel worthy of it. You have to adjust into this new level of success. And then all old stories start popping up like like when you start to have a really great life, you think, who am I to want even more? Is it selfish? Is it greedy when there's so many people who are struggling? And really trying to continue to do that work, I guess, at each new stage.
Mm-hmm. Let's just break that down because there's a few steps along the way. The first one was the decision to actually invest in other ways in your business. What was your approach to that? And did you have some boundaries around what you were comfortable with, what you weren't comfortable with? And I know you cover it towards the back of the book. What happens if in your business you just don't have the cash flow to make that investment? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, and this is kind of how I think about the worlds of, the accounting world and the almost the woo-woo world over here, is that for me, they're not two distinct things. They actually are completely interwoven together. And people always ask me, like, how much should I be investing? That's one of the most common questions I get, like, how much of my revenue should I invest? I'm like, well, I don't know. Like it's going to be very different for everyone.
Mm.
One of my business friends remortgaged her house to go and hire a business coach. Like
Wow.
she actually drew money down
I
out
just
of their
got a cold chill then. I just got a real shiver, physical shiver.
and that felt really aligned for her. I have certainly got to a point, we had a stage in our early days of business. My husband had also started his business around the same time. We were maxing out credit cards. We were taking out high interest loans. And a lot of people around were like, you guys are flipping crazy. Someone needs to go and get a job. And I was like, I had this inane sense everything's going to be okay. So I probably have more of a high risk profile than a lot of people. But on the flip side of it, I would never remortgage my home to hire a coach. That just doesn't feel aligned for me. So I think that this is the thing, is that everyone needs to check in on their risk, on their own personal financial situation. I've certainly worked with some clients of mine over the years who have wealthy parents, a wealthy partner, a nest egg. And they're like, I've got the money. I'm like, awesome. We can go all in on this if it feels good for you. So this is the thing. Everyone needs to weigh up what that looks like. And however much you choose to invest, I ask everyone to be very mindful about how they're doing it and what their intention is behind it. Hence why I love this word intentional profit. So if you are going to be putting money into your business, don't just be like, yeah, that coach sounds really great, or that course, or hiring a team member. Let's just go and hire a team member without doing it with a clear game plan. So one of my early clients, in fact, I think she was my first client. She was my first ever paying client. She was paying her assistant more than she was paying herself. And one of the first things that I did with her is I ran the numbers. I said, "Did you know that you pay her more than you pay yourself?" And she was mortified. And I said, "Look, before we make investment decisions, we have a look and we say, if I spend this money, what's it going to deliver back to me? Don't just go and hire a full-time admin assistant because you feel like, what is that going to do? How much of your time is that going to free up? What extra revenue is that going to add into your business? Is this going to be something that's going to deliver a positive profit to you and your business?" So really just empower people to be really mindful about their investments, to be thinking about the long-term game plan for this investment.
So that philosophy of intention isn't just about intentional profit. It's about being intentional in really every aspect of your approach to business.
Exactly.
Yeah. I want you do talk a little about some of the sort of profiles, I guess, or this, that where we come from in terms of our approach to money. And I know we have a number of money coaches on the call today and involved in our network. How do you break down those sort of archetypes, I suppose, around where we sit? I know I think I know where I sat based on the descriptions that you use in the book, but can we just run through for those who aren't familiar so they get a feel for what are the differences in the way we think about money?
So one of the things that I talk about is the money blocks and the ways that people are unintentionally blocking money from flowing to them. Is that helpful to this conversation?
Yes, I think it is. Yeah.
So basically, there's three main blocks that I talk about. One being a block in receiving, one being a block in holding, and one being a block in spending or investing. So let me share a little bit about how each of those play out. A block in receiving means that you unintentionally block money from coming to you. So let me share some ways that might play out. You might be chatting to a client and they say, "Oh, how much extra would it be to do a report about that?" And you say, "Oh, don't be silly, I'll throw that in for you." And then later you go, "Why did I bloody say that?" Maybe a friend of yours says, "Hey, I'd really love your help with something." And then you say, "Oh, don't be silly. You don't have to pay me. You're my mate." And it's fine. Like, I'm not saying that you can't do those things. Sometimes it's nice to throw in a bonus for a client. Like I love to do that, surprise and delight, I call it. Sometimes you might want to help a friend and you say, no, I actually really want to do this to help you. But what I'm talking about here is where someone is willing to pay you, maybe a client, maybe to come and speak to a group. Someone might say, "Hey, how much is it?" And you say, "Oh, don't worry about it." Sometimes it might feel aligned to do that. And other times you might say, "Actually, I'd feel really resentful." And I think that this, for me, is what receiving is about. It's about an energetic exchange. What feels good to you? And are you going to be resentful by saying no about something later? So that's the first one, is a block in receiving. The second one is a block in holding. And this was me in London to a T. I wish I could go back to 25-year-old Claire, tell her to have a few less pints of beer and put some money in a savings account. Bloody hell. But I spent it all. I was like, I'm rich for the first time in my life. I can go anywhere every weekend. I was off to Sweden and Ireland and you name it. Like, I was just having the time of my life. And I mean, look, I'm glad I had fun, but I do wish that I had held on to some of it rather than just spent all of it. So a block in holding is where anytime you make a little bit more money in your business, you step into your next income level and you're like, where the bloody hell is that going? I'm spending it as fast as it's coming in. So that can be a block in holding. And then the last one is a block in spending or investing. And people say, who's got a problem with spending? I don't have a problem with it's easy to spend money. And yet what I see with a lot of business owners is they tell me, okay, I'm here, I want to be here. And I'm like, awesome. Okay, what we need to do is we need to, you need to go and hire a new team member. People are like, whoa, that's so much money. That's terrifying. And I'm like, yeah, it is. It's terrifying to take a step that's different to what you're used to. It's terrifying to join a course. That course that I joined, I put my last cents in my bank account into joining that course, which thankfully, years and years on has completely changed the trajectory of my life. But at the time, that was a terrifying investment. Absolutely terrifying to spend a couple of $100s on that. So, a block in investing is where you can't spend money you're scared to because you're used to having this big nest egg and hanging on to it. So with these different ways that you might be blocking money, some of them might resonate, all of them might resonate. It might change at different points in your life. As I shared, mine sort of has changed a lot over the years. I kind of go through different phases of not spending money and then spending too much and, and unintentionally blocking money coming in. So it's just being aware and starting to identify what you do and then thinking about, why am I doing this?
And one of the techniques that you obviously talk about is money meetings. You talk about the purpose of money meetings and who you have them with. I'm assuming money meetings are still something you do regularly.
Absolutely.
So just talk us through that process and how we go about that.
Okay. So one of the biggest things when I first start working, obviously I'm a money mentor. So people come to me because they want to make more money. And so I say, cool, you want to make more money? I said, how often do you sit down and look at your money? And I would say that 99% of people that come to me are like, what do you mean? And I said, well, you said it's the most important thing to you. Do you sit down and look at your money? What do you mean, Claire? Like, I do my tax return and, I know how much my sales are. No. I'm talking like sit down and spend conscious time in your finances. So a lot of people don't. And this is what I want to change. If you are watching this and thinking, I want to have a wildly wealthy business, carve out time to sit down and look at your money. So let me share a little bit about what my processes look like. I sit down and do a cash flow forecast meeting on a Monday morning. Normally doing it at this time. I've had to reschedule it.
Oh, sorry. We've stuffed up the week.
But you'll notice that I use the word reschedule because life happens, right? But what I do is it doesn't get deleted. It gets moved. So it's not like, I'm happy to be flexible with these things, but it's like I go, okay, let's do it at a different time and day. So that's my Monday morning, setting the week up. I know what's coming in, what's going out, and when. I can make decisions, empowering decisions about my business based on those details. The next thing that I do on a Friday, this isn't really business related, but I'm going to share it anyway because it might be helpful. I sit down with my husband and we have an hour together where we talk about money. Now, a lot of this, because we both run businesses, some of it's business related, some's personal, but we might talk about things like, hey, are we going to do that trip? How much is it going to cost? Have we priced it up? Where's the mortgage at? Hey, are you still thinking about hiring that team member? What's that going to look like? Do we have enough buffer in the businesses to do that? We literally dedicate an hour of our week to talking about money because it's important to us.
Mm-hmm.
And people always say to me, but what if I don't have a partner? I'm like, lucky you. You don't have to negotiate with anyone. You can sit down on your own and you can just make decisions. You don't have to be having conversations about should I, should not. You get to be in the driver's seat of your money. But I still, encourage you to sit down in many ways, shapes, and forms and look at your finances and say, okay, this is dedicated time to really think about my finances, your business finances, your personal finances, and really say, if this is important to you, dedicate the time to it. That's how change happens, is by actually pulling out the time and actually really starting to say, okay, what decisions do I need to make? What things do I need to do differently?
Now, one of the questions that's come through from Chris is superannuation. Is that part of your money meeting, either with yourself on a weekly basis or perhaps less frequently? How important, because we know a lot about inequities in superannuation, particularly for women as we come in and out of the workforce at various different times in our careers. Does that factor into those discussions that you have?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that I empower everyone to do is to pay themselves a wage. And that's one of the things that we do through my process of budgeting and mapping out what your year looks like. I didn't mention my other money meeting, which is at the end of the month. We also look back at the results from the month, the quarter, the half before. But look, when I sit down with on my Monday morning meeting, I am always looking at what's coming up ahead. And I have an account where I put my tax and my super separate to my main finances. So I'm constantly checking in, because what I hear from a lot of business owners is they get to, perhaps they've just started paying a wage. They get to the end of the quarter and they're like, I didn't know that I had to pay super. And I'm like, well, you have to pay super if you're paying yourself a wage. Yeah. If you're here in Australia. But it's really about having these conversations with your accountant, being really strategic. How much do I want to be doing? My husband and I just did a tax planning meeting with our accountant, looking at the year ahead. And she's saying, you can make extra voluntary contributions. You can reduce you can reduce your taxable income. This is what this would look like. And we can have conversations about, do we want to do that? To what extent do we want to do that? But, really, like, you've got to be empowered with this stuff. And I would really encourage everyone to have a separate account where you put your tax aside. If you pay GST, you put that money into an account. And when the tax bill comes around, or your superannuation payment comes around, it's not like, oh, it's like, yeah, cool, the money's there. Like for me, when they're like, you owe BAS, I'm like, we've always got the money's put aside. That's it. There's no stress that happens in our house around that. And that's something that I would really empower everyone to do.
They're great tips, because you can also use them even at a personal financial level, can't you? Just in terms of looking, if you don't have a business, if you're even just a salary and wage earner, how you're allocating your own savings in that process.
Exactly. I actually use, I've got a system that I teach inside my course, which is like, cash flow forecasting, looking at your numbers every month. I use the exact same tools for my personal finances. So I actually do a personal cash flow forecast every week. At the end of the month, I have a meeting where we sit down. It sounds kind of dorky. We check, how much did we spend against our budget? Where did we go over? Where were we under? I literally use the same framework for both.
And how does that make you feel? Like, it's obviously a useful and practical tool, but what emotions do you get out of that when you see how that's panned out?
Yeah, and look, I'm going to be really honest here. Like, I'm quite I just want to be really transparent. There are times when we do this process and it feels like crap. Like, if you get to the end of a month and your numbers haven't landed where you'd put them in the budget, you kind of go, oh, it's really deflating. Or you look at your cash flow forecast and you're like, oh, I kind of hope that there'd be more, buffer there. That's a very real feeling that I still experience sometimes. Like, we might get to the end of the month and we've spent way more on eating out for the month than we'd hoped. And I'm like, oh, it's really disappointing that we blew the budget on that. But here's the thing. That was happening anyway. Like, one of the things that a big reason that people don't want to look at their numbers, they're like, it's so depressing. And I'm like, that was going on anyway. You were running your business at a loss, whether
it's just
like
that you didn't know about it, or you weren't paying attention to it, or it was a big surprise that was about to come down.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or, people get, and they're like, oh, my credit card's maxed out again. I'm like, see, it was happening anyway. What this does is it empowers you. So sometimes I do look and I'm like, oh, that's a bit depressing. I spent way more on eating out this month. But guess what? I now know that. And coming into next month, I can say, do you know what? We need to tighten the reins a little bit on eating out, because we don't want to blow the budget. That felt really bad. If I look at my cash flow forecast and I'm like, whoa, I missed my target over there, which, happens to me still. I then go, okay, what am I going to do? Do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to relaunch that other thing. I'm going to reach out and make them an offer. I'm going to proactively do something differently to change my financial situation, as compared to sitting back being victim, just being like, if I don't look at it, it'll go away. It doesn't go away. Thing that I would say, yes, it's empowering, but it can also feel really crappy, to be honest, when you go through that process to see what's going on, to realize, oh, I missed my mark. But hey, at least now you were in the driver's seat. You get to make decisions differently. You get to say, how can I do things differently moving forward?
Thanks for that, Claire, for being so honest about it too, because I think sometimes we can feel like it's only us that aren't ticking the boxes and, and achieving all those goals. So it's great to hear that even the experts have those real struggles, and it's not always an upward trajectory, which isn't the way life goes, is it? I just want to step through the intentional profit framework. You've talked about a little bit about mindset, which is obviously the first step, and being clear about what you want and how, and knowing yourself, I suppose, and what some of those blocks are. You then talk about intentionally investing in your growth. What are the types of investments that we should be looking at? And how did you go about that process in your own business?
Yeah, so there's lots of different ways that you can invest in your business. There's long-term investments. So for example, this book cost me a bloody arm and a leg to write. I'm going to be honest. I hired a publicist.
As well as time, no doubt.
So much time. And this was definitely more of a branding long-term investment. I know this money will come back to me in time, but this was not a decision that I made going, I'll write a book and then next month I'll make all the money back plus double. So there are some investments, and particularly I think a lot of things around branding. For example, I go and get beautiful professional photo shoots. Now, I don't go and get a photo shoot done and then the next day my bank account doubles. It doesn't work like that. This stuff's kind of long burn stuff. And it also doesn't straight away pay back. Like someone's branding, having a beautiful logo, beautiful visuals around your brand. It's not like someone sees that and then straight away buys from you. However, has anyone ever seen a business or a brand that's kind of just died over time? Yeah, I can see a couple of nodding heads. If you do not invest in your brand, in your aesthetics, in your website, all of those things, that will absolutely have a declining effect on your business over time. So that's one area to invest in, is like your long-term growth. There are some direct sales return investments that I talk about where it's like you would anticipate that investment would pay back pretty quickly. So some things like that. And again, it's not just this simple, but something like Facebook ads. In theory, if you put Facebook ads up and you make more sales, that should be something where you put money in and you make the money back pretty quickly. If you are a designer and you are fully booked out and you hire a second designer, you pay them a wage, you charge a margin. In theory, you should be making money back from that pretty quickly in the short term. Is this making sense?
Yeah. So it's about looking at those investments in terms of both the quicker returns and the longer term investments. Is the danger sometimes that we throw all our eggs into the quick returns because we want the quick returns, but we forget about those longer term pieces?
Oh, absolutely. And things like longer term, like things like hiring a lawyer. I know that I have so much resistance. Clients like, I don't need terms and conditions. And I'm like, you don't until you do. And yes, I acknowledge that perhaps on day one of business, everyone can't go and spend $2,000-$3,000 on a contract. I recognize that. But it's also like these things can really become big, big problems in your business if you don't invest in them. Having a brand, like I sometimes look at people's businesses and I'm like, you've got to like present, if you want to be charging premium prices, you've got to have a beautiful professional brand that people are going to trust when they first come to you. So it really is kind of this delicate dance. And again, don't ask me for percentages because it's different for everyone. Someone who runs a branding agency should probably spend a bit more money than maybe your local plumber who, is, cleaning toilets and things like that. So it's going to vary depending on the industry, depending on your business, depending on your clientele as well, what that balance looks like.
The third step is anchoring your goals with a financial plan. So there's obviously a lot of intentional parts to that. Firstly, that whole goal setting piece, and we have spent some time talking about that in the past, but it's also not just having goals and the objectives and the time frame. You're then saying you've got to put numbers around that. That can be really hard for a lot of us.
Yeah, I get so much resistance to this. People are, I don't know what's going to happen in the next year. I'm like, guess what? I don't either. Neither does Coke. Neither does Qantas. You know, for someone who came from a big corporate background, people think that everyone else has got it figured out. And I'm like, the thing is with a plan is that it's the best information that you have at a point in time. So the biggest resistance that I hear, there's a couple of things that people say. I don't know how to do it. And in the book, I break it down. I'm like, it's actually overwhelmingly when people come through my course or do this exercise with me, people go, oh, that was pretty easy. I'm like, yeah, it actually is. It's not this, you don't need to be a CPA to pull together a budget. It's really just about like, what do I think is going to be coming in? What do I think is going to be going out and when? The next thing is that you need to let go of the resistance around what if I get it wrong? You're going to get it wrong. I get my personal budget wrong all the time. I get my business budget wrong. But the thing is, I had a plan. And then what I can do is I can sit down, have a look and go, okay, that went over budget. What was the plan? Why did I go off plan? Is it still important to me to stick to my eating out budget every month? Maybe I just increase the budget. Or maybe I say, do you know what? Maybe I need to rein that back in a bit. Or maybe I need to earn more money so that I can keep eating out as much as I want. You get to play around with that using your plan. But yeah, I think every single business owner, if you are serious about long-term growth, create a budget. And now's a perfect time of year to be doing that.
The fourth step, and you've touched on this a little bit, but there's a couple of examples I'd love to get you to talk about, is scaling up using meaningful marketing strategies. You talk about how, and I think it's a fear that probably, a lot of micro businesses have about, I can't possibly be investing in marketing strategy, but you talk about baby steps and how you can look at alternative ways that if you don't have the cash for the whatever the service that you're looking for, you can be a bit creative and use the old bartering system in some ways. And of course, we're in a network of women in business who offer all sorts of services. And so I think that's a really appealing example to talk about. You talk about, for example, as basic as things like childcare swaps so that you can free up time. Can you just give us some of those examples and how you and your clients have used, I guess, some creative ways to achieve some of those mountains of marketing investment?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it comes to me to an energetic exchange. So I have one of my girlfriends, actually, she used to work at the same company as me. We were both pregnant, both lost our jobs at the same time, and both have gone on to start successful businesses.
We really need to throw that former employer into the bad books, I think, by the sounds of it.
Anyway, her and I, she's extremely intelligent, very, very savvy marketing brain. And she obviously loves to come to me and get advice about, investments and about how to run her business more successfully. And so we have, over the years, we've always had this thing where, she might say, hey, can I spend an hour of your time, pick your brains about something, and then I could help you with some ideas around this. And so far, like it's always felt like a really fantastic, energetic exchange. I wouldn't be doing that with, anyone and everyone, but this can be a way that if you aren't quite at a stage to invest yet, you can find someone who is willing to do a service exchange. Can be an example. You can also, like, for example, a lot of people come to me and like, I've got on my vision board that I want you to be my coach. Now, my one-on-one coaching is at a really high price point. I work with a lot of premium clients, and I say, well, there's so many ways that you can work with me that isn't spending that much every single month. You can come and join one of my group programs. You could join a course. You could grab my book. My book's only $32.95. There's other ways that you can make an investment that isn't. Does that make sense? Like you can go be in someone's energy in a different way. So this is what I empower people to do, is it's like, yeah, maybe the thing that you want's over there. Maybe you want a $100,000 website, but for now, can you build yourself a website with the help of a clever design friend as something just in the short term, so that rather than sitting here being paralyzed and doing nothing, you're taking some sort of step forward towards your big goal.
Yeah, I think that's a danger. Sometimes we have something in mind and we feel we're not able to execute it, we can't afford it, we can't do it, so instead we do nothing and just let it kind of sit out there, and we may never get to that point. So what are we losing on the way through by not trying to come up with some creative way? And I'd certainly encourage members of W&A who are on the call today to just think about who else is on this call, who else is in our member directory that you may be able to strike up a conversation with and look at some creative ways of exchange. The fifth part of the framework is becoming a gun at pivoting and problem solving. I reckon most of us have got some experience in that to a lesser or greater degree. Thank you, COVID, and really thank you to small business. I mean, if we can't problem solve, we're probably not there, but there's obviously more detailed strategies around that, and particularly in relation to money.
Yeah, and I think this is something really important that, again, I share a lot about the challenges that I've been through on my business journey, because it's just a very real part of the game. Stuff is going to happen. And I think there's so much resilience and empowerment in knowing that when stuff comes up, you have the skills to navigate through the challenges. It doesn't mean that your life's, because you master your money mindset, it doesn't mean that for the rest of your life, you're never going to have problems. It just means that you learn the tools of how to navigate through challenging times. And, like talking before about cash flow, like if I look at my cash flow forecast and it's not looking like what I want it to, I'm not bawling my eyes out in the corner of the room, shaking, deciding to shut down my business. I'm like, well, okay, cool. What are we going to do? Okay, let's go and launch this thing, or why don't I get out more and promote my book more? Or I come up with ways to navigate through those times. And this is ultimately what mindset is. It doesn't mean an absence of problems. It means having a toolkit for navigating through the inevitable challenges that you will face.
Does it help you also in just your scheduling and where your focus is going to be in any given week or month when you take that approach?
Yeah, you can start to go, well, what am I spending my time and energy on? A lot of us spend our time in a very reactive state. And when you identify that this area here is going to need a bit more of my love, then you can really start to look at your calendar and think, maybe I need to spend a bit more time on my marketing or serving my existing clients, whatever it might be.
Great. The sixth part of the framework is laying the groundwork for growth and expansion. How much mindset has to come into that as well? Because, deciding to grow and actually growing can be two very different things.
Yeah, well, from my experience, a lot of people don't even allow themselves to think that crazy, amazing things are possible for them. And I think that's the biggest hurdle that I talk about in this chapter is it's like, if you don't think that something's possible for you, if I talk about my clients that make $100,000 a month and you think that would never happen for me, well, it's kind of what you're setting yourself up for. And this is really what this chapter is about. It's about getting excited about what is possible and saying, whoa, that person's doing it and that person's doing it and that person's doing it. Maybe I could do it. And then starting to actually take the steps to making those things possible. There's so many things that I have in my life right now that I'm like, I can't, even 5 years ago, it would blow my mind to be experiencing them now. And it's just come from allowing myself to have big and crazy dreams.
I'm going to just give a heads up to everyone watching that we're going to throw open to questions in a minute. So get yourselves ready, and you can either use the little hand raising symbol should you wish to, or you can just come off mute and I'll do my best to kind of seek you out. I know in a previous webinar I missed someone in the question, so if I do, please just draw your attention to yourself and let me do that. But before we finish off, there's so much in the book, Claire, and it's a really usable book. So I would certainly recommend it to everyone who's watching and listening today. But you also do pull out the practice of gratitude as something that's really important as part of this. Can you just tell us how you use gratitude in how you work in your daily practice?
Yeah, so gratitude basically means, and it sounds a little bit cliche, but being grateful for what you've got. And I used to be stuck in a space where I'm like, I've got nothing to be grateful for. My business isn't where I want it to be. And I'd fall into these really negative cycles around thinking. But the truth is, like, success and happiness is actually just how you are feeling in your everyday to day life. I was nearly 12 months ago now, my gosh, on the 12th of June last year, I was in a really serious car accident. I suffered really severe whiplash that to this day gives me a lot of grief, back pain, neck pain. But I kind of always have this date in mind, and I think I could have been dead. Like, people could be coming up to my 1 year anniversary of when I passed away. And, leading up to then, my kids, I'm going to be honest, my kids are 5 and 7. They were really pissing me off. I was just like, I'm so over being a mom. They're so annoying. And this accident actually gave me this whole new lease. Like, I am so much calmer now. I look at these little people. I'm like, I'm here to see you. I'm here. And of course they still annoy me, but it's actually enabled me and empowered me. Like, when I'm having a tough day and I think, oh, I can sit there and think, I'm alive, and what are the things that I can be grateful for every day? When I'm hanging washing out, for so long, I couldn't lift my arms. I was like this little robot with my whiplash. And when I'm hanging washing up now, I'm like, I can lift my arms up. Gosh, there's so many people who can't hang washing out. There's people who can't lift their arms and hang washing, and I can. And bloody hell, I'm lucky. I'm wiping down the benches and I'm like, I used to dream about living by the water, and I live here. And I'm wiping the benches under my kitchen and think, gosh, I'm lucky. And it's really like finding the beautiful moments in every day. And no matter what you were going through right now, there's something to be grateful for. When I had my accident, I was on the couch. I was just in so much pain. I'm like, oh, thank God for painkillers. I don't know. I'm so grateful that I live in a country where I can get access to heavy pain relief. It really is starting to look at what you can be grateful for in the day to day. If your business isn't where you want it to be, have you got one person who's paying you? I sit there sometimes and I go, oh, thank you so much for paying me. Thank you. Thank you. I hope this investment comes back to you 10 times over. Even if I don't have as many clients as I want, the ones that I do have, I send them these little like love bombs, these little gratitudes, and just say, thank you for paying me. When money hits my bank account, I do this like, yes, so much came in. I just made $1,500. And I think that it's so easy to let go of that as your business is growing and forget about people are paying me money. Hey, how cool is this? And I think that that's what you get to choose. Friday, my kids have one of the other bloody million things that they have at schools. And I was like, oh, I don't have time for this, was my first reaction. And I'm like, I get to take time out. If I had a corporate job, I would be fired for the amount of times that I have to go to all these school things. And I get to be the mum who's there like, hi, mom's here. And I get to be grateful for that and just be present. So this is one thing that all of you can do, no matter what stage of, life you're at. Look for the little moments. When you're hanging washing up next time, I want you to think of me with my little robot arms and think, I can move. Oh my gosh.
That's
There's
amazing.
so many people in the world who don't have the ability to use their arms. How blessed am I? And just really, really love bomb into anything. Eat a sandwich and look at it and think, oh my gosh, so many people around the world don't get to eat. How blessed am I that I'm getting to eat a meal? Thank you. Be really present in all the moments.
I love that, Claire. That's a really positive way to invite questions to come in, because it's really easy to get a little depressed. We hear a lot about inflation and interest rates, and there's some pretty depressing stuff around. So it's really great to just be reminded of honestly why we made the choices to do what we do, and how we can be grateful for the little things that all add up into a much bigger thing in the end. So who's got a question?
I might finish answering Chris's question before, because I don't know if I quite answered it properly. But in terms of how soon should you start to invest in superannuation, I mean, I would say the sooner that you can, the better. And again, this is something that I'd really encourage people to talk to their accountant about. But I'm going to be completely honest here. I didn't pay super in my early days of business. I wasn't paying myself a wage in the traditional sense. I was, we set up a trust and we're paying trust distributions. But the sooner that you can start doing it, I look back now and I'm really regretting that I kind of didn't start from the outset, because I think that the sooner that you can start saying, this is my real business, I pay myself a real wage and I'm putting money aside into my superannuation, the better.
Katie, I think you came off microphone. Did you have a question?
I did. Sorry, I'll take my video off, but apologies for my view. I had a very quick question in regards to the budgeting that you were talking about before. And quick backstory, I have a health clinic. It's all online. So I've done very, very well to make it really extremely low overheads, to be quite honest. I run my business on about $550 a month. And I've got a fair few subcontractors that work for me. So it's going great guns, but now heading to a point where business growth is seriously happening. Grew too fast a year ago, decided to put the brakes, but now it's time for me to create a new budget. But I'm just not entirely sure. And again, it goes into the investing, where to invest that particular money to, and how to create that budget.
Yeah, for sure.
Quick answer, buy this book.
Yeah, that's it.
Look, something I would say, Katie, from my experience, most people actually know where to invest in a business and they're just scared.
Yeah.
Like, truthfully, like a lot of the work that I do with people, I'm like, I don't come in and go, Katie, you need to do this. Like, a lot of the work that I do, I'm like, you tell me, like, what do you need to do? And then you go, oh, well, I kind of think that I probably should. And then usually people go, I know that I need a business coach, or I know that I need to hire an assistant, or I know that I need to upgrade the website. But what blocks people, and this is why I bang on about mindset, is it's that courage, it's the fear, it's the what if it all goes wrong. And that's a lot of the work that I'm doing with people. Is it's not actually giving people this is what you should do. It's empowering people to have the courage to do the scary things.
Yeah.
So what I would do with your plan, sit down and just literally think, what do I want to make for this year? And this is where a lot of people go wrong, because people go, I want to double my business. And I go, cool. And then they keep their expenses the same. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
So you think you're going to make double the money without doing anything differently? Like, obviously you want to make more money. You've got to do things differently. And so then map out that plan and say, how much realistically do I want to invest? What is that going to look like? What do I do if it all goes pear-shaped? What's my game plan here? And that is really how you create massive transformational growth in your business.
Yeah, got you. And I did have a second question, if that's okay, just on the paying yourself a wage, particularly for working on the business and not in the business. Again, another shift, gone back to working in the business because I was doing the same thing as your client, and that's paying my admin staff and myself nothing. In terms of that point of view, what my thought was is working in the business and reinvesting that income, because I do have other incomes, reinvesting that income while working in there back into the business, or do you think just pay a wage?
So I think what I would suggest for you is to sit down with your accountant and really talk about the most tax efficient way to be structuring your business and what to be doing with your like overall business. If you're not pulling a wage out of your business, that's a bit concerning to me. I'd be having a look at like what's going on, and that's okay. Like, this is what I mean about intentional profit. If you go in the short term, I'm doing this because if I do this for 3 months, then my business will get there. That's fine. But if you're just like, the game plan is that I'm not going to make any money off my business, we're not running a charity here. Like, we're running businesses, and when I talk about intentional profit, sometimes it's okay to run at a loss or break even. Like, that's, I actually talk about this in the book, but I don't want you to just do it just like, yeah, I've just got to invest. But it's like, what's the game plan here? Get really clear about where you want to be. How long are you planning to do that for? And then that is how you kind of really build a business with intention, is having a really clear plan about where you're going, how you're going to get there. And I definitely think, like, in terms of like wage, profit, tax, trust, sit down with your accountant, say, have a look, like, what do you recommend? And again, at different times, different things are going to work for you, for your business. But, you know, if you're wanting to get a mortgage, like last year we bought this house, I was like, I want my wage to look massive. So we did a lot of things to really bump up the wage that I was paying myself. Other times you might say, well, you know, what can we do to you know, to reduce our wage in this financial period? So again, your accountant's the best person to give you that advice.
Yeah, fair. Cool. Good call. Thank you.
Great questions, Katie, and well done, and all the best with your business. We've got time for probably 1 or 2 more questions. I'm sorry. So if you do want to jump in, please come off mute or give me a wave, and I'll have a look. Oh, come on. You've got an expert here who can tell you about, you know, everything to do with your business. She's actually charging you nothing. How much do you charge, Claire, for an hour coaching session?
It's about $1,000 an hour.
Okay, $1,000 an hour, people, and you're getting it for free. So, you know, now's the chance.
And that's okay.
I'll jump in if possible.
Yeah, you're just shy. Jump in, Cara.
Hi, thank you so much for your talk this morning. I am curious to learn a little bit more about how you recommended the shifting the money mindset. So I know that's a big topic, but it seems like you've done a lot of work in there. So if you have particular tips for how to start making those shifts, I guess like tools or daily practices that you'd recommend.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really fantastic question. Thanks, Cara. My little sister's actually called Cara too, so great name. Look, one of the very first things that I would recommend, and like I said, this is not the whole frame. Like there's a whole process to actually really create long-term sustainable change. But these are just a couple of little tips. The first one is start noticing your thoughts and your language around money, finances, things that happen. So, for example, if when I was talking about my client making $100,000, if your instant reaction was that's bullshit, or that would never happen for me, or she's just showing off, just start to notice. Just that's the very, very first thing that I want you to start to do. When other people talk about money, like maybe you talk to your partner and they go, we can't afford that. And maybe you go, it says that on repeat. We can't afford that. We can't afford that. And you go, isn't that interesting? Listen to yourself. Like listen to what comes up for you when you're thinking, okay, I'm going to go and hire the new team member. And you go, it's probably not going to work. Whenever you do things like this, it doesn't work. Just hear what's going on. Hear the chatter. That is the very, very first step in changing your money mindset, is to notice it. And when you start this work, you'll notice it around all the other people around you as well. I know when I first started this journey, I'd hear my mum and I'd be like, gosh, like no wonder I've got so many bad money stories, because she just doesn't operate in that space. So I think that is something really empowering that I would love you to start doing. Notice what you feel, you think, and you say about money. That's just the first step. Let's start noticing. And you'll hear yourself. You hear yourself say things. You know, as a mum now, like with my kids, I don't ever say we can't afford that. They go, when are we getting the dream house? And I'm like, oh, it'll happen soon. When? I'm like, I don't know yet. Can we go and do this? And I'm like, oh, we're choosing to spend our money on other things at the moment. It's subtle little shifts that really make all the difference. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is that gratitude practice. Honestly, it will change your life. Not just in terms of money, but you will feel a happier, more fulfilled person to just constantly be thinking about what can I be grateful for right here and right now. If you start freaking out about money, if you look at your bank account and you're like, oh, it's so depressing, what can I be grateful for? Do you know what? At least I don't have $100,000 of credit card debt. Yes, grateful for that. At least I am not living on the streets. At least I'm not homeless. Yes. At least I've got heaps of superannuation. Yes. Like there's always something that you can look at and really be like leaning into and being like, yes, I feel so amazing. I am so lucky. I am so rich. And that's where this work gets to start.
Claire, fabulous messages. We have run out of time this morning, but I would love you to tell us more about where we can obviously buy the book and to find out more, and hopefully those who are online today perhaps get in touch with you.
Amazing. Well, I might just, if it's all right, I'll just pop my Instagram handle on here
Yeah.
because that is one of my favorite places to hang out. So come on over, say hi. It's just Clare, CLARE _Wood_coach. And also my website, which is also very creative, just clarewood.com. You can buy my book there. You can find out more about working with me. And yeah, that's probably the best 2 ways to get in touch. But I share heaps and heaps of tips. If you've loved today on Insta, I'm there sharing tips and facts and things all the time. You can drop me a DM and have a bit of a chat. I love to connect with people.
Fantastic, Claire. Thanks so much. Really practical session, really helpful session. So thank you everyone who's participated. We will get the recording out to you, and we obviously will provide those links for you to contact Claire. We have been featuring intentional profit in our weekly newsletter, the book club section, and it'll be on our website and in our upcoming Women's Network Australia magazine book review section. So thank you, Claire, and all the best with it. We wish you all the success.
Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you everyone for coming along. I really appreciate all of you. Appreciate your time.
Great. Have a wonderful day, and let's be grateful.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you.